my luggage up.
All right, it's Friday morning. Thanks, Matt. It's always nice when someone wants to. It's Friday morning after the floor, and we are here in general housing. Just before lunch, we had a couple of things scheduled, but one of them, we'll be able to get to one of them, basically, which is a bill introduction of H111. And that is with Representative Sims from Craftsbury and other towns. Representative Sims, welcome. We're going to go around the circle just to introduce ourselves to you. Representative Stevens from Waterbury.
Representative James from Manchester.
I'm Joe Parsons. I represent Newbury, Thompson, and Groton.
Emily Krasnow, South Burlington.
Ashley Bartley, Fairfax, and Georgia.
Caleb Elder, Starksboro.
Dennis Labounty, Caledonia 3.
Elizabeth Burrows, Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
Larry Labor, Essex, Orleans 1.
Mary Howard, Rutland City, District 6.
Robin Chester, Benjamin, Paulette, Middletown Springs, Rupert, Wells, and Tinmouth.
And Representative Lamont is just coming into the room. Representative Lamont, who do you represent?
The Loyal Washington District.
All right. In committee, at some point before the end of the year, I want to actually count the number of towns we represent. I mean, Larry ought to work 14 towns. I think we're covering 85% of the Gores and so Representative Sims, welcome to our committee. You represent at least 4 towns, I think.
Yeah.
And you're here to present, to do a sponsor's introduction to H111. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here with you all. Representative Catherine Sims from Orleans 4, which includes Albany, Craftsbury, Greensboro, Glover. And really appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk with you about H111, an act relating to workforce housing, which seeks to provide strategic investments to create more low and moderate income housing, reduce regulatory barriers, and build capacity to address our housing challenges. Given the title of your committee, I think you're well aware of the challenges our communities are facing. Really every town in Vermont experiencing housing shortages. And we all want everyone in our communities to be housed. And unfortunately, too many Vermonters are unhoused and too many renters are paying more than 30% of their income for their housing costs. Employers all across the state are really struggling to attract and retain our workforce due to the cost of housing and shortages. And at the same time, it's getting harder and harder to build housing, with a recent national study reporting that project costs are up 30% since 2019. And some communities face additional challenges to meet that housing need, including limited or no town water and sewer, old housing stock with really high energy burden, little or no return on investment for developing missing middle income housing, and a lack of capacity to undertake zoning updates, tackle permitting, and navigating all the various funding opportunities to address housing needs in a community. And so this committee, your committee, has done so much important work over the last several years, making historic investments, over $300 million in creating affordable housing and initiatives to house the most vulnerable low-income Vermonters. So thank you for all of that work. And there is still so much housing need. Some estimates say we need 30 to 40,000 additional units here in Vermont. And we're currently building at about 2,000 units a year. And projection shows that we need to be at 5,000 a year at minimum to make a meaningful dent in this challenge. And we don't have enough public dollars to do it all ourselves. We need more tools to bring in more players and complementary programs to help build more units. So, why this bill? It is the result of a lot of conversations this summer and fall with local developers, town planning commissions, regional planning commissions, realtors, VLCT, VHIA, VHCB, DHCD, all the acronyms, and many representatives, including many of you, who helped put together this workforce housing bill. And to just give you a sample of some of the challenges I heard about from my community, there was the developer who wanted to tackle a small infill development project of 6 affordable units in a small downtown community, but needed access to low-cost capital to make that project pencil out. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. another developer who just wrapped up a 9-unit project to bring non-code compliant units back online using VHIP funding. And we're starting to look around for another project, looking at 5 more units right nearby, but learned that those taking on rehabilitation of those additional units would trigger Act 250 because of the 5-5-10 rule. We can't do more than 10 units within 5 miles within 5 years. And the upfront risk and costs associated with going through Act 250 for that size project made the project not pencil out, and he didn't move forward with it. There was the homeowner who had a really large lot in town and knew that the hospital was struggling to find housing for nurses and wanted to add a little tiny house to their project using VHIP funding to create that new unit. But unfortunately, that project is ineligible for funding given how the program is currently structured. And then I know one community that's really struggling to attract teachers, and they have a bunch of dilapidated homes right downtown, but they don't even know how to start figuring out what they can do to address that challenge and add more units in their communities. So what do we need? This bill would try to provide strategic investments to create more low and middle income housing, incentivize smart growth in our village centers by reducing costs and regulatory burdens, and adding capacity at the local and regional level to help support planning and zoning around housing. Specifically, the bill would do a whole bunch of things. Sorry, it's such a big bill, but there's so many things that we could do. So forgive me for the long list, but I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. So the bill would appropriate $15 million in general funds to continue the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program, VHIP, which provides funding to bring non-code compliant units back online. And it would amend the VHIP language to clarify certain administrative features of the program and expand eligible uses to include new dwelling units, not limiting the program to ADUs. It would appropriate $10 million in general funds to continue the Missing Middle Home Ownership Program, which has been incredibly successful in providing subsidies for new construction or rehab of homes for purchase by income-eligible home buyers. And it adds additional language to ensure equitable distribution of funds to communities of different sizes and locations. It would create a new rental housing revolving loan program with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency to provide subsidized loans for rental housing developments that serve low to moderate income households between 65 AMI and 120. And it appropriates $15 million in general funds to launch that program. The bill appropriates $500,000 for the municipal planning grants, establishing priority for municipalities that don't have zoning bylaws to get them so that they can access all of the benefits that we're providing to communities that have zoning bylaws. The bill would also create housing resource navigators at our regional planning commissions to help support those communities that need assistance in identifying projects and navigating their way through all of the different funding opportunities to move projects along. It helps address some of the fees and barriers around wastewater by reducing the wastewater application fee for downtowns and village centers. It removes a redundant permit at A&R for wastewater connections when the town also provides that permit, and it eliminates the prime ag soil mitigation fee for alternative or community wastewater systems that serve a designated area. The bill also seeks to modernize Act 250 to reduce the time and cost for housing projects where we want them, in our downtowns and village centers with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. Overall, I think this bill seeks to add and enhance a number of tools that we have to address housing needs in all of our communities and takes advantage of the one-time funding that we have to create long-term vehicles to address housing in this moment. And I know there are a variety of housing bills in our various committees in this body and on the other side. And I feel that this bill complements those efforts and builds on the important work that this committee has done in previous years. And I hope that you'll take up the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I need to catch my breath first.
Sorry.
Representative Sims did that in 3 breaths. Can you? Representative Chestnut Tanchman.
Thank you for this. I love the broad sweep of it, the way it develops a lot of ideas and disparate efforts. As you know, in rural communities with no wastewater infrastructure, our lives are ruled by septic regulations. And so I'm wondering, at the risk of adding another piece to your bill, have you have you looked into that options for communities without wastewater treatment? Because we can't do infill housing in many cases. We can't add an ACU. Sorry. And just wondering if you had thoughts along those lines. I'm using you as a resource now rather than responding to you.
No, I mean, I think, right, having infrastructure helps accelerate development, and water and sewer infrastructure is really expensive and it's really complicated. And so, for me, the answers are, how do we help provide access to that funding, and how do we provide technical assistance and support to those communities? And so, hopefully with the IIJA money, there'll be a lot more federal resources available to communities. We did make progress with our ARPA funding as well, creating more opportunities for communities to access the funding they need to advance these projects. And this bill seeks to get at that in some ways by reducing some of those costs. So right now, if a community moves forward with the alternative or community sort of in-ground soil-based septic to serve a designated area, which I think often is a better fit for a smaller community, the Act 250 process usually adds additional prime ag soil mitigation fees that just further add to the costs and potentially putting them further out of reach for many of our small rural communities. And so I think finding ways that we can, as a state, smooth the process and reduce the cost helps more communities potentially be able to move forward with a big project. But there's also a lot of technical assistance and capacity needed, I think. Montgomery is a great example of a community that's been able to do it, in part because they have Charlie Hancock, who's this incredible person who's put, an inordinate amount of volunteer time and energy into figuring out how to make that happen. I hope that we can look at other partners like our regional planning commissions, and maybe we can find ways to enhance capacity there to help communities navigate all the steps that it takes to put in a system to create opportunity for more infill development.
Thank you.
Representative Elder.
Are you talking about Montgomery's rather novel local option tax that they instituted last year, or are you talking about something else?
No, they would just be able to put together a very complicated capital stack to pay for building out wastewater to serve their designated downtown. And it's just, there's a bunch of different programs, but they all have their own lengthy application
I
processes.
think they're fueling in part of the local option tax. They're the smallest community in Vermont with local option tax, and they're dedicating it to bonding for that, which is interesting. I think our former chair of Ways and Means, it was the first local option tax she ever voted for.
Okay.
Because she thought it was such a novel approach. I wouldn't want to put words in her mouth, but I did think that it was interesting to see a local option tax in a small community leveraged that way specifically for bonding on infrastructure. So
Well, and I appreciate highlighting that there are like different financial tools that are sometimes more accessible to some communities than others. And how do we, I think VLCT has a couple of revenue sharing proposals that try to get at that. How do we help all communities, regardless of size, access the financial tools and resources they need to pull off big projects that take money and I think also take capacity. And look forward to those ongoing conversations.
Do you have a knowledge of whether Montgomery utilized Vermont Council on Rural Development on one of their the work that VCRD does with local communities that are asking for help?
Yeah, so actually I think the wastewater project was one of the 3 priorities that emerged from a VCRD community visit. Not always like the sexiest project, but underpins the ability of a community to bring more economic development to a downtown. And so I think that's another great example of capacity that can be challenging for communities, like getting everyone together and saying what matters to us, like what's the most important in this moment, and how do we prioritize that, and what do we need to move it forward. And pleased to see that the Preservation Trust of Vermont and Vermont Council on Rural Development, I think, just received an earmark of $10 million to bring its process to more communities in a year, because it takes a lot of bandwidth, and hopefully, and I think that's specifically targeted at communities under 2,500. I think they can do like 10 projects a year now, and it'll be exciting to see if that helps more communities identify big projects, and then we need to find ways to make sure that there's support to help them write all those grant applications and then manage the project once they get the funding.
Well, that's what Charlie Hancock is for. to be honest, in small communities, it takes that one person to know that the resources are available, and then it's our job to make sure the resources are available so that when they get enthusiastic and they bring the community forward. And then what I love about the VCRD process, that if anybody doesn't know about it, it's they do town visits where they work with the community over the course of several months and have charrettes and have town meetings and come forward. The town is to come forward and really, they are really powerful. Waterbury actually never qualified because we couldn't quite figure out our differences on merging Waterbury Town and Waterbury Village, and they were like, we can't do that until you figure that out. But it's a very powerful tool for the communities to then identify, and then it's like, okay, well, we need water and sewer, we need infrastructure. How do we get there? Is always what it comes down to, and it's very powerful. And these tools that I think that you're asking for are the kinds of tools that need to be available once a community comes to the table and says we want to improve.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to hold that for some of our communities, we have 3-person volunteer select board members and a part-time town clerk, and often the same 3 people serving on 6 committees. I found there was some really compelling testimony on the BAA to appropriations from Ann Lawless, who's a select board member in the small town of Wheelock, and Sharon White up in Canaan, who, are the people that wear the million hats. And Ann was talking about how they're on their 3rd attempt at a flood plan for their community. And it's been a huge project that strained the limited bandwidth of volunteers in the community. And so, that's in part why we put in this bill the housing navigators to help expand the role of our RPCs to be there as a partner for communities who want to do housing, but there is so much to navigate and to learn about, and it can often be beyond the capacity of a volunteer who's also probably a parent and has a full-time job and serving on all the nonprofit boards in their town. And how do we think about ensuring that every community has the support they need to tackle this housing challenge, which every community faces? And really tried to think about that and some of the financial tools, the missing middle program and the revolving loan program and VIEP, to make sure that we're creating application processes that are really simple, that a large developer and a small developer can navigate, and that we're actively thinking about pushing those resources to every community so that there's kind of equitable geographic distribution as well, and that there's flexibility to fund the 30-unit project and the 6-unit project, because some communities really need that 30-unit project, but some don't need that. They need something smaller, and we need to make sure that the programs and the funding that we're distributing are really designed to be right-sized to different communities.
Further questions for Representative Sims? Thank you. At some point, we'll be starting to put together a housing bill, and we'll certainly order up a bill walkthrough at some point. We're focusing on family leave right now, but
also important. Thank you.
But we'll get a walkthrough to hear the numerous sections of the bill and get a beat on what we can do and where we can go.
Great. And if there's any way I can be a resource helping with witnesses or talking offline with folks, this is something I'm particularly passionate about this session. So look forward to following your work on it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Warm.
All right. Do you have the agenda? Yeah, you have the Friday agenda right there. Don't put it on. All right. We had on the agenda a committee discussion on 66, but I think I just want to break for lunch right now. And then we'll pick up after lunch with some witnesses this afternoon. So we'll just leave it right there. Thanks, committee.